what's up? Serena here from thriftdiving.com. Now, I have been so excited to share this project with you because these cabinets were ugly. I think if you probably poll 100 people, probably 90% of them would be like, dump them, get rid of them. Why are you even considering bringing these things into your house, your office, your she shed? But here at Thrift Diving, we know that these things can be made beautiful. So in this video, I'm going to share with you how I found these two metal cabinets. They were like $60 each at an online auction. And I'm going to walk you through how I removed the rust, how I filled the holes, because you can't use wood filler. So what did I use? We're going to walk through that. And I'm going to show you how I painted them. So if you come across some old metal furniture that has rust, don't feel like you have to toss it in the trash. You can actually paint this. You can paint over rust. You can remove it and then paint the metal. And I'm going to show you how to do it in this video. Are you ready? Because you're not going to believe this. And don't you dare skip to the end. You got to watch the whole thing. All right, let's jump into it right now. So if you can believe, it took over 2 years to finally get started on this project. It's one of those things that when you find it at an auction, you have to buy it. You don't know when you're going to use it, but you know you have to have it. That's what it was like with these cabinets. They had a little, well, I say a little bit of rust. I would say this is probably a medium rust situation. It wasn't eating through the metal, so I was able to remove that, and you'll see that in just a moment. But really, it was just the drawer fronts and the body that was in poor condition. The drawers, they didn't even have any rust on the interior, so it wasn't going to be as extensive as a project as I thought it would be. This is the part that I did not like. Cleaning these things was scary. There was so much debris stuck back behind these drawers, and I even found an old photograph that looks like it was taken from the classroom in the exact same spot where I found the cabinets 2 years ago. And this had to have been from like, what, 60s, 70s maybe? Now, my biggest concern with the drawer fronts is that it had really good hardware, but if you notice, there were lock sets that were missing on most of the cabinets, and it left pretty big holes. So I wasn't sure how I was going to navigate that, which you'll see in just a moment what I figured out. But I had to continue cleaning these out. I had to stick my entire arm back there. Oh my gosh. Let me tell you, that part was super nasty. I don't like cleaning out old furniture before I refinish it, but it's just one of those things you have to do. So once the cabinets were clean, the next part was to move on to removing the rust. You see this has got some on the bottom and along the sides here. The drawers, again, for the most part, are in pretty good condition. It's just the drawer fronts that needed some rust removing. So I'm using a rust dissolver, and you can find the link down below in the blog post that has all of the products, materials that I use. Now, what it said for me to do, and I didn't quite do this exactly as I was supposed to, was to use a wire brush and remove the rust flakes first and apply water to the rust and then apply the rust dissolver. I didn't do that. I just wanted to kind of jump right into it. So the results were still pretty good. You'll see in just a moment, the rust did come off pretty well. And I will tell you that there's other products that I've used that I like even better, because those instructions will tell you to apply the gel, the rust removing gel, wrap it in saran wrap, and you can even leave it overnight. Now, this particular gel said, oh, don't leave it more than 10 to 30 minutes, and be sure to not let it dry. There you see I'm using the wire brush just to kind of remove some of that rust. But for the most part, it worked pretty well, but just know that there are different rust removers and rust dissolvers, and it's up to you to decide what you like. But me personally, I will have my recommendations in the blog post. So anyway, the good thing about using gel is that you can apply it to a vertical surface. It's not going to run. You just want to use a paintbrush to spread it around. And then again, don't let it dry, remove it in 10 to 30 minutes. And if you've got heavy rust, you can reapply it as many times as you need to. But again, don't let it dry. Because if you let it dry, what it can do is remove the original finish of your metal. And that's fine because I'm going to be painting this. But if you've got a piece of furniture or metal that you don't want to remove the existing finish surrounding the rust, then you have to be careful with that. But you see the rust is coming off. It's working. But you may have to reapply it and do it a couple of times. I did the same procedure for the drawer fronts. Those look pretty bad, but they were ready for primer. And you might be wondering, do you have to prime metal before you paint it? What kind of paint do you even use? Well, the first thing I'll tell you is that you definitely want to prime metal, especially if it has rust. Now, if it has a light rust, which I would consider this to be a light rust, you can use a clean metal primer. But if you have heavy rust, you want to use the rusty metal primer. And those are by Rust-Oleum. This isn't sponsored by them. It's just what I use. It's easy to get at Home Depot, but I'm sure Lowe's has its own version. But the reason why you want to use this clean or rusty metal primer is because it's going to stop the rust. And if you do a really beautiful paint job on these cabinets, but you don't use primer or you use the wrong type of primer, your paint job is going to be destroyed over time because the rust is going to come back, most likely. And the metal could get destroyed. Okay, so here's a tip. When I'm doing any kind of spray painting, I always spray paint with the surface that's facing up as the surface that I'm painting. I never spray a vertical surface because I don't care if you follow the manufacturer's rules of 6 to 8 inches away from the metal, it always runs. Even if you do a thin coat, it always runs. Why is that? Gravity. That's why. So you see here that I'm just doing flat surfaces. I'll let it dry and then I'll flip it over and do another side once it's sort of dry to the touch. So just in case you don't do a lot of spray painting, you'll get better results if you let this surface dry and then flip it over and then do the next surface. Don't do any vertical surfaces. Now, one thing that I did backwards with this project is that I primed everything and then I realized, wait a minute, I've got these holes and I should have filled those holes before I moved forward. So I ended up having to take a couple of steps back and use this epoxy. It's like Play-Doh and you have to roll it up in your fingers and then you can use it on metal, automobiles, plumbing, just a lot of different surfaces. Now, it does take about an hour to set and then you can sand it, but sanding it by hand was very difficult. So I used this Dremel rotary tool and was able to get it to almost where it was kind of flush and then just made it flush with 150 grit sandpaper. But you see here, I'm pretty much ruining the primer. So I ended up having to backtrack and reprime all of those spots that I had just uncovered just to get these holes flush. And this was important because I was going to add some knobs to those center holes there where the lock sets were broken. And the holes had to be covered. And you see, I'd even started painting the cabinets and realized, oh, I didn't put the filler in there. So I had to go back and add more primer and then repaint it again, which you'll see in just a moment. So a lot of rework, but that's DIY for you. So let me tell you about the other thing that I did that created a lot of extra work for myself. This is what I use, Cranberry by Mineral Fusions. I love this paint, by the way. And the drawers got a coat of paint. Now, I wasn't even thinking about what I was going to do to the interior of the drawers. Remember, they didn't have rust, but I thought that I was going to be covering them in wallpaper. So I thought, well, why would I need to paint them? And then I realized I didn't have enough wallpaper to cover all 12 drawers. So I may as well just do a coat of white paint. Well, as I'm doing that, I'm getting spray paint on the red that I already did on the drawer fronts. And you'll see later that I ended up having to repaint those over again. So I did a lot of things twice. Not very good, not very smart, Serena, not at all. But anyway, after a coat of fresh paint, I let those dry and moved on to painting the other cabinet. Now at this point, I was pretty much almost running out of paint. I didn't have very much of this cranberry left. Well, it got down to where I had one coat of paint on this cabinet. And you know what one coat of paint looks like, right? It typically looks very spotty. You got to do 2 or 3 coats to get that nice full coverage. And at that point, I knew I was not going to be able to finish with this cranberry color. Okay, so I have officially run out of paint. This was me trying to be economical and using what I have on hand. Cranberry, I thought I had enough in this container. Apparently not. So I was able to get this cabinet painted, some of the drawers painted, but the other cabinet I was only able to get 1 coat, and I probably need maybe 2 or 3 coats. And there's just not enough left in here. So I went to Home Depot. I was going to do a color match for this, found another color that I actually like better. And so now we're going to do one that's kind of related, but you see this actually has a little bit more pink instead of like the reddish brown. So I think this is going to look much better with the colorful blinds that we have in here. And I cannot wait to see what this looks like once it's done. Doesn't Bob Ross call these happy mistakes? Well, this was definitely a happy mistake. I was not happy running back to Home Depot at like 8:30 at night trying to get a color match, but I was happy that I saw this color instead. And, you know, it sort of defeats the whole point of trying to reuse, or I should say, use up the materials that I already have in my stash, because that isn't what I wanted to do, is to buy new paint. But when you're forced to buy new paint, you may as well get the color that you really, really want. And this color, Sugar Beet by Behr, was perfect. And so I watched the Golden Girls, did another 2 coats of paint, even though they were already painted. And by the time those were done, it was time to move on to the drawers. Now, if you remember, the drawers had those lock sets that were missing. And because I wanted to put knobs in there, I needed to create washers. So I just used a nickel and drew some, templates here. And I cut them out. First, I drilled holes in the middle, and then I cut them out with my jigsaw. And you'll see in just a moment the reason why I did this, because when you're putting a knob in a big hole like that, you need something to help it not fall out. So you'll see that in just a moment. But I cut these out with a jigsaw and a scroll saw blade. And if you don't know how to use a jigsaw, this is the tool that I always tell people to learn how to use first. And I will leave a link down below, and you can find it up there in the corner on how to use a jigsaw. This is a free 30-minute tutorial that I put together. And I guarantee after you watch that video, you'll feel comfortable being able to use this tool. Okay, so moving on, the next part was to take some wallpaper and line the drawers. Now, typically I wouldn't use wallpaper to line the drawers only because it's expensive and this is removable, and I find that it doesn't actually stick very well. Not like paper or scrapbook paper and using decoupage. That is probably a better thing to use. But this is what I had on hand. I ordered this roll last year. I wasn't sure what I was going to use it for, and I figured some project would come up that I would be able to use it. And so this is the project. Now, this is something else that I did backwards. I wasn't thinking that I was going to want to paint the bottoms of these drawers, but as I was making them beautiful, I realized that I didn't want this uncovered part on the drawer. I know that nobody would see it. I wouldn't see it, but I wanted them to be pretty and covered as well. So after I did the paper on the interior, I turned them over, added 2 coats of paint, just because I couldn't let it go. Are you like that sometimes too? When you're working on projects, you just get ideas while you're working on it and you just have to do it, like the bottom of the drawer. Okay, moving on, putting paper on the sides of the drawers. It doesn't have to be an exact fit. What you should do though is trim away the excess, but leave a little bit of an overhang, because then what you'll do is use sandpaper to sand away the excess, and this is how you get a nice clean edge. I'll admit it was harder to do with wallpaper because it is thicker. So I did pull out a sander and use that just to sort of break that corner. And you'll see that it does easily peel off and it gives you a nice edge. Now you will want to use a little bit of Mod Podge along that edge just to secure it. And this is the last step, is putting on the hardware. We used that old lock set hole, and this was the perfect solution, making those wooden washers. And now the knobs stay on there. And I decided to do something whimsical. So you'll see in a moment how they all don't match. Anyway, I finished off the drawers with a little bit of Mod Podge because, again, that wallpaper was not really staying in place. So just doing a little coat in the corners helped to keep it secure and not coming up out of the drawer. There were actually 2 of the drawer fronts that still had lock sets attached, and I didn't know how to get those out. But I just used a pair of pliers and was able to unscrew the back of that lock set. It came right out. And then, I don't know, I just got this idea to take a hammer and see if I could just tap it out, and it popped right out. I love when things work out. Let's take a look at what these cabinets look like before this makeover. They were not fully covered in rust, but they were not in great condition. And now they look fantastic. You see my desk area there behind the cabinets. These cabinets are going to go underneath of the desks, and you'll see that in the next video. But remember, these had big holes on them where the lock sets were missing. And now I was able to cover the holes, add some whimsical knobs. These were just knobs I had on hand in my collection. And I didn't really spend any more than probably about $35 out of pocket for the materials, because I had most of it on hand, really just buying paint and some other materials. But for the most part, it wasn't an expensive project. And I love this sugar beet color. It's perfect. So if you've got some furniture that's got light rust on it, you want to paint it, you're not sure what kind of paint to use, you don't know if you have to prime it or not, hopefully this video will give you all the materials and tools that you need in order to move forward on that project. You don't have to leave it at the thrift store. You don't have to get rid of it. It's just rust. You can remove it and you can protect that metal and make it look beautiful and add some whimsy to it. So what did you think? Pretty amazing, right? Like, here's this ugly thing that somebody probably would have just thrown in the dumpster, but we made it beautiful. once again, I love it. I love when makeovers turn out much better than what you expect. A few bumps and bruises along the way with this project, but all projects, you learn something new and then you move on to the next one. So if you enjoyed this project, give it a thumbs up. Be sure to come back to my blog, thriftdiving.com. You can actually find the link down below on where to read the blog post. If you want some more information about the materials, the steps that I did in order to paint metal cabinets, please do come back to my blog. And you can also subscribe and get 5 ebooks and printables and checklists just for subscribing. And also, you will get notified via email whenever there is a new post that comes out from me, my personal email list. All right, guys, I will see you next video. Be sure to subscribe to my podcast. I do publish 1 podcast episode every week, so you're probably missing that, and there's a lot of good stuff that you could be listening to. All right, come back again next time, and I'll see you next video.